Hello, welcome to another episode of the JimRPG show. It's the 5th of May 2020. We've got a huge show of gaming news to cover today. We're going to be talking about Assassin's Creed Valhalla. We've got more info to share on that. We're going to be covering The Last of Us 2. Now, there are no spoilers whatsoever, but we're going to be covering some news on that. And we also have some rumors about the latest Nvidia cards. So let's get straight into it. And our first story is about Assassin's Creed Valhalla. And Eurogamer, there's a bit more information about how the game is going to be played. So I will just read a few pieces of info. So the article interviews the lead producer Julian Lafaire, and he talks about how the game revolves around your settlement now. So he says, it's your own Viking village you'll see prosper and grow, and which your clanmates will live in, Lafaire tells me. Lafaire? It's at the center of our quests and the center of the decisions you make. We want players to see the consequences of their actions. Big story arcs will begin and end here, the impact of your decisions rippling through your growing community. You'll see the effects of alliances such as weddings to forge relationships between clans, and the consequences of harsh choices you have to face. It's also where you'll see some of the game's romances play out. It really changed the shape of the game we were making, Lafaire says. Instead of exploring one territory, then moving on to another and having no real opportunity or reason to return, the settlement changes the structure, so you'll go on an adventure and then be encouraged to come back to your settlement. It changes the way we're playing the game we're making. At least that's the bet we're making. So that's really interesting. It seems as though Valhalla is taking a different approach to the last couple of games in Origins and Odyssey. I have played Origins, but I haven't played Odyssey, but I believe Odyssey is largely the same in the way that he says you go from one settlement to the next, one location to the next, because a lot of the locations have levels on them, or it did in the past, and you couldn't really go to another location because the level would be too high. So in other words, they would be level gated, and it seems as though they may still be level gated, but you will return to the original location that you started out in. They want to build more of a settlement. They want you to build your clan, and they want you to grow, the number of clansmen that you have that will help fight for you. He also says, as Lafaire speaks, he describes a settlement as a place of importance in Valhalla, reminiscent of Skyhold and the Normandy, which players return to time and again. As you grow your village, new buildings will be available to customize and upgrade, such as barracks, blacksmith, and tattoo parlor. He also goes on to say that Norway is the start of the game, but that Britain will be where most of the game will be. But the reason he decided that was, he says, you have to understand where these people are coming from, Lafaire explains. You'll feel the harshness of the lands, the political pressure there at the time. You'll feel all that, and hopefully you'll understand why you have to move to England, where most of the game takes place. Britain will then make up the bulk of the game's map, Lafaire adds, but a few surprise areas will also feature. And he also talks about what is perceived to be the villain, at least in the opening trailer that they revealed last week. He talks about how King Alfred appeared to be the villain, but actually he's a bit more nuanced than that. So he says he's shown in that villainous way in the trailer, but over the course of the game, you'll see that there's a lot more nuance to him. The game looks set to cover the Viking campaign against him, the one which led to him being on the run, burning cakes, and his eventual success at pushing the Norse back and unifying swaths of England. Alfred the Great is a very important historical figure we want to treat right, Lafer says, and to do so, it's all in the subtleties and nuances you'll find. So it is interesting. They're kind of looking at a little bit of revisionist history. Not saying because I don't know the period well enough, but as they say that the winners write history, we probably had that type of look back at history where it's been written from the English or the Normandy point of view, and this will be looking at it from the Viking point of view. And so you're going to be playing as the invader, I guess, and it seems as though they want you to go back and start in Norway because they want you to feel like they want to give you reasons why they decided to settle in England. Now he also goes on to say why they revealed Ivor as the male character in the opening trailer. So he says, one thing the trailer doesn't tell you is that Ivor can be played as either male or female, and that your choice of gender is only part of the customization you'll get. Beards, tattoos, and wall paint options will be available to pick from. Your gear will also be customizable, Lafer says, as will your Viking longboats. You can dual-wield weapons, and shields make a return after people complain they were left out of Odyssey. Why does the trailer focus on the male version of Ivor only, I asked. The answer, as was the case with Odyssey's Cassandra and Alexios, is that the marketing will showcase both at different points. Now, I'm so glad that the marketing will showcase both the male and female versions. I do wish that they probably could have gone with the female version first, because that actually probably would have got a bigger, attention. That would have got more attention to the game, and definitely more discussion. To see another, white guy, bearded white guy on the front of another video game, it's kind of a bit too samey, I think. But there's a small part I kind of do understand, because they make up such a large bulk of the gaming audience. We saw what happened, I think, with Battlefield 5, where they went with the female character on the front, and there was so much controversy that I don't know if that's what they assumed, so they wanted to avoid that. And I disagree. I think they should have gone with a female character in Assassin's Creed, because if you line up all of the Assassin's Creed covers, I don't actually recall there being one, maybe Syndicate, but most of them have been male covers, and it would have been kind of cool to have the female cover for once. So they also go on to write that the mythology will be involved in the game, which is kind of interesting, because I've always seen the Assassin's Creed games as more historical, but it's a game, so if they want to go into that down that path, and if they can tie it in with the story, I'm pretty cool with that. They talk about how they have new abilities for the Raven, and there is a interesting part here where he says, any military location you encounter on the rivers of England is fully raidable, Lafer explains. We want you to be playing the ultimate Viking fantasy, so you'll get to have your Viking buddies along with you on a longship. sometimes you'll get resources to take back and upgrade your settlement, or maybe additional firepower to help take down higher level bandits in the region. So he says, this is important, this mention of having friends along for the ride makes me wonder if there was any truth to rumors Valhalla might dabble with co-op play, which has not returned after a shaky effort in 2014's Unity. Ubisoft has confirmed to me this isn't the case, although some kind of interactivity seems to be on the cards. Valhalla is a single-player game, Ubisoft spokesperson clarified, with many online components encouraging players to share their progress and creativity. One thing Ubisoft is willing to pin down for long-time fans is a continuation of the franchise's overall arc for those engaged in that, meaning more backstory on the first civilization and a third outing for present-day character Layla, whose story suddenly got interesting in Odyssey's final expansion. We found a way to blend the present day into a new type of experience for players, and present day is playable, I can confirm that. So a couple of things there is that there is no co-op play, and you won't actually be going into battles with other Assassin's Creed Valhalla single players, which I think that would have been extremely cool. And I think they probably could do that, if not for this title, then definitely in the future, where you're playing your single player game, you've created your character, and now you want to go into battle against, I guess, lots of other Assassin's Creed players. That would have been pretty cool. So yeah, maybe that will come somewhere sometime in the future. And they also say, yes, present day is back, and I'm not sure exactly who on the development team insists on having present day, because these are the sequences in the games that I always literally just do it as fast as possible and skip as quick as I can. The historical aspect is just way more fun than some boring archaeologist getting attacked by the military. So yeah, that's more Assassin's Creed Valhalla information. We'll be covering the game more as more information comes along. There is going to be a gameplay review of how it's going to look like on Xbox Series X. That will be May the 7th, so just in a few days, and we'll probably do another show immediately after. There's not that much more information. It's coming out on next gen, on PC, PlayStation 5, and Xbox Series X, and there will be PS4 versions, and Xbox One and Stadia, yeah, it will be out this holiday, and I would think that it's probably going to be November, because the consoles probably won't be September or October, so it's probably going to be November for Assassin's Creed. Our next story is about The Last of Us Part 2. Now, before I start, again, there won't be any spoilers, and I won't be listing this in the description below. This story comes from US Gamer, so you can check the story out there yourself. And this story is about how Sony says they have identified The Last of Us Part 2 leakers or leaker. So earlier this week, major pieces of The Last of Us Part 2's plot were leaked online. Speculation ran amok about who and why it happened, but today Sony is clearing up some misconceptions. Speaking to GameIndustry.biz, Sony confirmed that it has identified the primary individuals responsible for The Last of Us Part 2 leaks. The statement goes on to say that the person or people involved were not affiliated with Sony Interactive Entertainment or Naughty Dog. Sony declined further comments, as there is still an ongoing investigation. Okay, so I don't believe there are any spoilers in the article, so you are fine to go and check that out. But I do recall that in the last show, when I talked about The Last of Us Part 2, that it looked like the leaker was a disgruntled Naughty Dog employee, and now Sony says that that is not the case. It's a hacker, and previously, when I said that it was a disgruntled Naughty Dog employee, and that the clips were actually leaked in response to the studio's reportedly poor working conditions leading up to launch. So Sony is saying it's a hacker. It's not a Naughty Dog employee, and we'll just have to wait and see if there's more information about this. But at this point in time, there's no point in spreading rumors about this. The only thing we really should be going on is information from third-party outlets that are covering gaming news, and it's kind of ridiculous to hang your hat on one side or the other. We just have to wait and see if there's more information. Now, Jim Sterling actually put out a video, as he does on his channel, talking about The Last of Us 2 leaks. And I thought that was a really interesting video, because he goes on to say that it's not really whether it's about the hacker. It's not really about whether it was a Naughty Dog employee or not that released it. The fact remains that there was a hacker. That's a separate story, and the studio's reportedly poor working conditions for its staff is another separate story. So there are two separate stories. We shouldn't forget that, because it's a hacker now, therefore we forget about the poor working conditions. And I think he's absolutely right. So I will leave a link for Jim's video in the description below. And I think everybody should go and check out his point of view, because his video makes a lot of sense. So let's follow up a little bit more on this and exactly how individual reporters have been reporting it. So Jason Schreier, which I believe formerly Kotaku, he goes on to write, okay, after talking to two people with direct knowledge of how TLOU 2 leaked, as well as some Naughty Dog employees, I have a good idea of what happened. Short version, hackers found a security vulnerability in a patch for an older Naughty Dog game and used it to get access to Naughty Dog's servers. I think the footage that leaked is from devs playing an early build. I haven't watched it. Most importantly, rumors of this being an act of protest by a contractor whose pay was robbed are not true. Naughty Dog actually extended pay and healthcare benefits for contractors due to COVID. So he talks about how the rumors being an act of protest by a contractor whose pay was robbed are not true, which is fine, but he doesn't address the fact that people were talking about it because the working conditions in Naughty Dog were poor. And when we say working conditions, we're talking about extensive crunch, especially for a lot of these AAA games like Red Dead Redemption 2, Ubisoft games, Naughty Dog games. Many of the AAA games seem to have extensive crunch. Okay, so here's somebody else that replied to Jason Schreier's thread on Twitter, and he's got a better explanation of what's happening with the Last of Us 2 leaks. So he says, this is Pixel Butts. For those of you interested in The Last of Us 2 leaks and how it happened, here's your rundown. I have no idea how many tweets this will be, so buckle up. Every Naughty Dog game has a final patch that is pushed to the game that contains an Amazon AWS key. So this is the cloud key. That when paired with a secret bucket ID, it will give full access to the server's contents. There's a different key and bucket ID per game. This is important. This vulnerability was discovered recently and some hackers took full advantage of it, saving The Last of Us 1, Uncharted 3 and other dev stuff. At the time it was disclosed to me around early February and was very early on, so January 2020 it was discovered. Come March, keys and data were saved somewhere around 1 to 3 terabytes, though I can only say 1 terabyte for sure. They were trying to dump The Last of Us 1 in an effort to get the game's key, as Uncharted 3 had The Last of Us 1 material, so surely The Last of Us 1 and had The Last of Us 2. No idea in the end, but come April things got spicy. In April, all the leaks of story were validated by the footage posted. I cannot speak for the text posts with story, but I can say that the states from discovery and disclosure match with timestamps in the footage as well. You can check yourself, bottom left of all footage. Come May 30th, late at night, the source that disclosed this to me, and I believe maybe he meant April 30th, the source that disclosed this to me stated that the key had changed, so Naughty Dog for sure knew how to resolve this issue, and no keys work with the bucket IDs now. This is good, but there's more. The individual that spoke to me is a direct source of this compromise, but is not, as far as I'm aware or can tell, not the one that leaked this material. I say this because even they were weirdly skeptical about the Naughty Dog employee leak things because they were mad. I've been watching this for about 3 months now, and after speaking to a first-hand source of this, my only conclusion is they, and their immediate circle, did not leak it, but shared information relating to what I described, and another party proceeded to leak such material. This is not the first time this has happened in circles like this either to boot. I trust their word as a first-hand source of this happening, and I trust that they're not dumb enough to leak it, but whether they leaked everything to get such is another story. In regards to the dev kit nonsense, yes, you would need a dev kit to do this, and given that it's relatively easy to get one, yes, really it is. This is not very much of a problem. I can say the circle for the vulnerability owns such hardware as well. I've seen the photos. What's the point I'm making? The point, there's plenty of room to argue and Naughty Dog employees involved, but from the evidence which I have submitted to Naughty Dog back in February stands the point to a Naughty Dog made security vulnerability that was exploited, not an angry employee. While I will not give names, I will say this. I've been around, I know leaks, I listen, I watch, I keep tabs on things. I've known about this for months and kept quiet publicly, but since it's blocked out now and news coverage confirmed what I've known, I've decided to say so publicly. I have no affiliation with the group, I have no materials from the leak, and I'm not going to. I had my ass bitten once, and I don't need a second round of it. But putting the truth out there is important, because even then, you'll still have people saying it was a Naughty Dog employee. Don't believe what sounds like the juiciest story, even if it's what you want to hear. Sometimes it's really that boring. Hackerman exploiting a vulnerability created by the company's own games to gain internal access. Hopefully this has been enlightening for you. And as one final note, the person that spoke to me asked me about my previous legal run-in. That's primarily what led to this disclosure to begin with. I do not advocate or suggest stealing and leaking. Preservation is important, but don't do it through stealing. Tacking this onto the bottom, since people insist that it was a Naughty Dog employee when no, it wasn't. Why you think it's a Naughty Dog employee that leaked this is still baffling to me. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed that information. So we get information, and you can choose what you want to do with it, whether you believe it or not. But this is the information that's coming out now, and I would say most of that sounds very believable. So there you have it, The Last of Us 2 leaks. It seems as though as we've delved into it, it looks like it was probably hackers. Okay, something that we haven't really discussed that much on this show is VR, virtual reality, and one of the reasons why is that it really has kind of disappeared since its launch a few years ago. So here's an article from Kotaku, and I want to show you another article that is the same story about this, just to highlight the different viewpoints that different news sources give their headlines to. So Kotaku writes, even after a large increase due to Half Life Alyx, less than 2% of Steam users own VR headsets. So they write, Half Life Alyx helped lead a large surge of new VR headsets being connected to Steam, according to data from Valve. However, the percentage of Steam users who own VR headsets is still hovering at around 1.9%. According to a recent hardware survey from Valve, the first since Alyx was released on Steam. Back in late March, the new Half-Life game convinced a lot of people to buy or plug in old VR headsets. Road to VR estimates that over 950,000 new headsets were connected to Steam last month, which according to the site is the largest single month increase on the platform. So I haven't played Half-Life Alyx yet. I do have a headset, but usually a lot of these first-person style games where you have to move around a lot in VR, I tend to get a little bit motion sickness because I don't have the kind of VR legs for it at the moment. So I may play it in due course, but at this point in time, I don't know if it's a good game or not. That said, it's led to a lot of people using their VR headset again, and they write that there's 950,000 new headsets. But actually, I think the more interesting aspect of this article is that it feels, the headline feels a little bit negative, because they say less than 2% of Steam users own VR headsets. Now, if I click on this Road to VR estimate article, we'll get a very different type of headline. And it says, analysis, Half-Life Alyx adds nearly 1 million VR users to Steam in record gain. And look at that, it's even got a Excel spreadsheet showing how much gain there was, and previously it was around 1%, and now it's up to 1.9, so almost 50% extra users in the month of March, which is a huge gain when you look at the other gains that it's had since its launch. And most of this information is largely the same, but I think it does show a couple of things. And as you know, on this show, we try to get through the hype a lot and just read the news for what it is. And yes, there was a 50% gain in VR users. That said, Kotaku does make a good point that there is less than 2% of Steam users that are using VR headsets, and maybe it's just not seeing the adoption rate that I guess these VR makers or VR hardware makers were hoping for. If you haven't used a VR headset, I believe, at least from my personal use, I've actually found that the being wired or connected to the computer is a little bit of a hassle. So even though it sounds like such a small issue, I have the Oculus Rift S, and there is just the one cable that's connected to the back of the computer. And I believe the older HTC Vives and the older Oculus Rift had a couple more cables connected. to the PC. And even now on the Rift S, there are no cameras to set up. So they've removed a lot of that accessibility or user friendliness from the Rift S. But still being connected is a bit of a hindrance, I would say. And not only that, I think in general, you saw that as well with 3D TVs. It wasn't that comfortable to actually sit and watch a 3D movie at home with glasses on. And it's kind of similar with VR. Like, the experience is really cool for about 20 minutes, but at the end of the day, for a long period of time gaming, it a lot more comfortable to be looking at a 2D screen. Now, I can't say that for everyone, but from my experience, that's what it feels like. So I would say, while yes, Kotaku is being a little bit overly negative, there is a bit of a concern, I would say, with the VR hardware not having as much of a increase or growth as it probably needed to have. And I don't think the article goes on too much more about. There is a little bit more information about what type of headsets that are being used in the Road to VR article. And it says here the Oculus has about 45% share on the Steam marketplace. HTC has 30%, and the Valve Index. I don't know if this is the Valve Index actually, but that's the only one that I know of. Has about 10%. So that's VR at the moment. It's still a very niche piece of hardware. Okay, on to some gaming news. And one of my favorite franchises, Yakuza. And this is Yakuza 7, although they've taken the 7 out now. Yakuza Like a Dragon. There has been a listing on it in the last 24 hours on the Steam database. So the Steam database, I believe, is like a spider. And they're not affiliated with Valve or Steam, but they just go and run, I guess, searches to see who adds things onto Steam. And Sega have put some information, at least, or put the started the I guess, what do you call it, the app, the listing, the store listing for Yakuza Like a Dragon. So in other words, it's almost like they're announcing it for Steam. Now, there's every chance that this could be cancelled. This is not official, but it's very early days and is looking very much like Yakuza Like a Dragon will have a Steam release. Now, we probably already knew that it was coming, simply because they've been putting out the Yakuza games on Steam. So they've got Yakuza 0, Yakuza Kiwami, which is a remake of the first game, and Yakuza Kiwami 2, remake of the second game. Those are out on Steam, but they did end up skipping Yakuza 6, which they actually released that before Kiwami 2 on PlayStation 4. So I guess they kind of want to run some of the games in order, but they also want to get back up onto, I guess, back up to the schedule. And if they want to do that, then I would say that there's a good chance that they want to release Yakuza Like a Dragon simultaneously on PlayStation 4 and PC, and maybe even Xbox, because they've also started to do some sort of pre-marketing on Xbox, particularly on Game Pass, because Yakuza 0, I believe Yakuza Kiwami are also on Game Pass now. So they're doing the right things in terms of I guess, marketing this in the West. Certainly with Yakuza 0, that was a big jump in terms of interest for this series. Not to mention, it's one of my favorite games and one that everybody should play. So with 0, they really got a lot of interest in the series, and I hope they grow on that with a simultaneous release of Yakuza Like a Dragon on all the systems. If they put it out 6 months later, there's a lot less interest. Generally speaking, we've seen most companies often go for the simultaneous release because that gets the most marketing hype. You get the most number of players, the most number of people talking about it, and that's the way to to get growth in your games. So if that's what they're doing, I think that's a great strategy to release them all at the same time. VGChartz has an article on year-on-year sales and has market share charts leading up to April the 25th. So this is up to April the 25th, and I just thought this was really interesting. Let me read the stats or the sales for you. So for PlayStation 4, in 2017, they sold 4.8 million units. In 2018, they sold 5 million. 2019, they sold 4.2. And 2020, this is for 4 months of the year, they've already sold 3.2 million PS4s. Xbox One, this is also interesting because, you know, PS4 have a huge lead over Xbox One, and they have done so for, I guess, most of this generation. And actually, it's a surprise that I think PS4 has kind of double the number of console hardware sold than Xbox One, but Xbox One still continues to sell. I mean, technically speaking, or theoretically speaking, you would say that once you see such a lead, in 2017 they sold 4.8 to 1.5 million units for Xbox One, you would continue to see this kind of narrow, slowly decreasing, or quickly decreasing, sorry, and you would just see the other console get most of the sales. That's kind of what happened with the 3DS and Vita. You don't often see Xbox One sticking around. If I just read out the Xbox One numbers now, Xbox One in 2017 had 1.4 million, 2018 they had 1.5 million, 2019 they had 1.1, and 2020 they had 1 million. So it's still pretty steady for Xbox One, even though the Xbox One S is inferior to the base PS4. They do have Xbox One X, which is much more superior to the PS4 Pro, and that might be a reason why it's still steady at about 1 million units a year. But I think, you know, even though they're last, it's still kind of impressive that they're sticking around, which is my point. They're still selling hardware. And of course, the Switch. In 2017, they sold 3 million. In 2018, they sold 3.3. In 2019, they sold 4. And in 2026. So they had a huge jump. At this 2020, in 4 months, they have sold 50% more units than they did in 2019. You know, and a lot of that has to do with Animal Crossing, I believe, in the last month or so. Animal Crossing sold 7 million units, and I would say it's a little bit different to the more gamer type games on the Switch, such as Mario Odyssey and Zelda Breath of the Wild. We know that Nintendo likes to come out with their core gamer games first before releasing their more casual games when the hardware price is slowly decreased. They like to use their core gamers as the voice and message of their console. And their strategy is working wonderfully because they just, in 4 months, they sold 50% more hardware than they did last year. And they didn't have a bad 2019 either. And if you look at the total number of consoles sold, even just between 2019 and 2020, in 4 months, in 2020, they sold as many consoles as they did in 2019. Now, obviously, a ton of people are stuck at home due to the coronavirus, which has definitely helped these numbers. And video games is booming right now, but this is still huge, 10 million units. And Animal Crossing is profiting from this lockdown and getting a lot more people involved, both in gaming and also, I guess, casual gaming on a portable. And who knows, if the lockdown continues, especially in the US, you can look to this figure to be closer to like 20 million units. And by the way, this is global sales. So these are global sales to these hardware units. I don't watch many, I guess, multiplayer tournaments. I'm not exactly a huge multiplayer type gamer. I mostly play single player games. But Evo is one of those tournaments that I sometimes just sneak a look in. And, most people are watching online these days. So this makes a ton of sense. I don't think they will do anything terribly differently. Everything is already online these days for Evo anyway. They just stream everything on Twitch. So I don't see too much changing. But the good news is that everybody who paid for it will get a refund. So while we're talking about Evo, let's talk about some more fighting games. And Naga has done some analysis into fighting game stats from Steam charts. So I thought this was really interesting to see the fighting game community on PC and what they were actually playing. So let's talk about some of the things that he or she says before we get into the actual stats. So they write, outside of some specific and niche games, nearly every fighting game user base is bigger on PS4. Those numbers are not always representative of the size of the genre. Context is important. Some games are way bigger because they have a big IP with them. Some games have nobody in ranked because everybody's in lobbies. There is a reason a lot of people are hoping for crossplay for the genre. It'd help a ton of games regardless of possible issues. I've included some games that are not considered fighting games by most people, but are by their players, regardless of their quality. This table is from this thread's creation date, which is yesterday. Yesterday is 4th of May. If I ever update it with different numbers, I'll say it here. No all-time peak for that would be Guilty Gear 1, I think, because it kept saying an error occurred. Alright, so basically Naga is saying the PC community for fighting games are a lot smaller. So don't look at these numbers and say there's nobody playing, which is kind of true. There's nobody playing on PC, but there may be people playing on PlayStation 4. But we can kind of get an indication what people are actually playing and if it was successful on PC. And also it's interesting to see what games are performing better than others. So I'll just list the interesting ones. We still have a lot of people playing BlazBlue. It's getting 350 current players, and the 30-day average is about 150. And they have a lot of BlazBlue, but most people are playing Essential Fiction. Brawlhalla. This has 18,000. Now this is free to play, and it's basically a Smash clone. You have 4 people fighting on the stage, and they're all, well, actually I think it's 8 people, if I'm not mistaken. Believe it's 8. 4-player online, free for all, and 8-player 4v4 and free for all. And it's a Smash clone. There are a lot of characters, and you'll notice that it's free to play. So there's 18,000 people, and that basically dwarfs everything else on this list. The next highest would be For Honor at 3,000, and Tekken at also at 3,000, and Brawlhalla is free to play, and you'll note here on their Steam store they say Brawlhalla will always be 100% free to play with no pay to win advantages and no in-game purchases to keep you from the action. So that's it. That's the secret sauce. Make a good game, and if you can, make it free to play if you want to get lots of people playing your game. The stats say it right here. That you can quickly gain a ton of people if you make it free, and there are no pay-to-win objectives in your game. And you can see, if you look at this is all the DLC that they have. Brawlhalla Collector's Pack, which is a bunch of money which you can buy skins and stuff, and there's a couple of other packs with exclusive skins, but just 3 DLC, and you can get an All Legends pack. So basically I believe you can use any character that you want, and that's about $20 US dollars. But you can play Brawlhalla, and every week they will rotate through 8 characters that you can use, so you can always try different characters. And in a game like Smash, or Smash-like type game, you do want to try a lot of different characters anyway, so I don't think that's going to affect the game terribly much. It might have an issue with a lot of free-to-play players, and all of these players using the same characters all the time. So if you actually bought the Legends pack and you were able to use all of the characters, you might be actually fighting a ton of people that have using the same character all the time. And this is actually really impressive. This game came out 3 years ago, and surprise, this is published by Ubisoft, and it's free to play, and also it's cross-platform with millions of players on PS4, Xbox One, Nintendo Switch, and Steam. That's really impressive. Let's have a look at some other numbers here, and you'll see that I want to talk about Dead or Alive 6, because last episode we were talking about how Koei Tecmo did really well, but here we see the numbers for Dead or Alive 6. There were only 150 people on average, 30-day average, that are playing this game, and they have a free-to-play version. Dead or Alive, they have a free-to-play version on Steam, and I think you get a couple of characters that you can choose from, which, I mean, it's more like a demo at that point, but you can see the huge number of players playing Brawlhalla, compared to Dead or Alive 6. It isn't even comparable. That's like 100 times more players in Valhalla. And so Dead or Alive 6 has got to be thinking of some way to get players. But of course, well, Dead or Alive 6, it's basically been discontinued for now because they've said that they've got their final update for the game, and they won't be doing any more updates for Dead or Alive 6, so you can kind of say that the game is finished at the moment, or complete would probably be the better term to put it. But yeah, it looks like it's not doing that well, at least judging from these numbers. Dragon Ball Fighter Z pulls in about 1,200 players, so more people are playing Fighter Z than Xenoverse 2. For Honor is doing incredibly well, and at one stage they gave away the game for this, and also I believe, I'm not 100% sure, but it might be free to play as well. So let's check this. It's not free to play. There's a starter edition, which might get you one character, I believe. So For Honor is a game where there's, I think, 3 different types of character that, and you build your character, and it's kind of like a gladiatorial match. Yeah, I've never played this, but it doesn't look too bad. Okay, so For Honor is doing incredibly well, I think, given all of the competition here, given all of the fighting games here, it is number 2 in the number of people that are actually playing. So yeah, For Honor is doing well, and Ubisoft should be pleased. They have both the number 1 and number 2 games in the fighting community. That's very impressive. Okay, Grand Blue, a lot of people playing that. I didn't realize Grand Blue was a fighting game. Maybe Fantasy Versus is a fighting game. Guilty Gear, I don't know how you say this, XRD, Revelator, 190 players for 30-day average. A lot of people playing Injustice 2, 300 people. King of Fighters, 150 people, 30-day average. Now I think, yeah, Dead or Alive 6, 150 people, which, I did say, what did I say? Yeah, when I say Guilty Gear is doing 190 versus Dead or Alive 6 doing 150, you kind of expect that a ton more money has been put into Dead or Alive 6, so you'd expect that to do better than something like a Guilty Gear, which is a little bit more niche. But they're very small numbers either way, but it's surprising that Dead or Alive 6 is so low. King of Fighters 13 pulls in 150 people for the 30-day average. Mortal Kombat 11 is doing really well, 1,600 people for the 30-day average. So these are all concurrent numbers, like 1,600 people playing at the same time on the PC. And again, there could be more people playing on the PlayStation 4. Naruto Shippuden 4, 500 people. Rivals of Aether, 450 people. Now, I think this is interesting, the next few. Soul Calibur 6 has 319 people, so it's not really doing a whole lot better than Dead or Alive 6. And maybe Namco have kind of dropped the support for Soul Calibur 6. They do have 2 franchises, so they have Soul Calibur 6 and Tekken 7. So maybe they're putting all their eggs in one basket in Tekken 7. Yeah, this is really surprising that Soul Calibur isn't doing nearly as well as 7. And Street Fighter 5, of course, it still has a massive fan base. So it's got 1,700 people. But the surprising thing there is that it's been dwarfed by Tekken 7, 3,000 people playing Tekken 7 versus Street Fighter 5. So for a quick rundown, the top 6 was Brawlhalla at 17,000, For Honor 3,600, Tekken 7 at 3,000, Street Fighter 5 at 1,700, Mortal Kombat 11 at 1,697, and Dragon Ball FighterZ 1,217. So I think the news there is that if you have a free to play version of the game, you are going to get a significant number more players than you would otherwise, because as you can see, the other games are not free to play, and they have about 3,000 4-digit number of players, whereas Brawlhalla has 5-digit number of players. I think that information would be really interesting to publishers, especially on how to get more people playing your game. Okay, let's talk about hardware news now. And over the weekend, we had some hardware rumors. This one came from Tweaktown, came on April the 29th, so about 5 or 6 days ago. But they're talking about, these are the rumored specs for the next generation Nvidia GeForce cards, the GeForce 30 series. So let's have a quick look at the specs. You'll see that it's got the GPU code for the chip. They have the GA100 for the GeForce RTX 3080 Ti, GA103 for the GeForce RTX 3080, and the GeForce 3070 will also use the GA103, but a cut down version of the GA103 chip. And they have another chip for the GeForce RTX 3060, which is the GA104 chip. Now, they do go on to write that this RTX 3080 Ti may not actually be the GA100 chip, and that might just be for workstation cards or Quadro cards. But who knows at this point? Maybe Nvidia decided to go crazy and give us the entire full GA100. I wouldn't say it's they wouldn't do that, because this would be a massive hit if they actually delivered on these specs. I would say that a lot of people, after seeing this, would probably hold out and definitely stump up for this card. And this will be quite evident as I reveal the specs. But yeah, in the past, I believe the 2080 Ti was run on the GA102 chip. And then the GA100 chip was for another workstation card. But here they've listed these specs, or these rumored specs. They've listed the 3080 Ti as the GA100 chip, which is very interesting. So the GeForce RTX 3080 Ti will have 8,192 GPU cores. The ray tracing cores will be 256. The tensor cores will be 1,024. There'll be a boost clock of 1750. They have a VRAM speed, which is a bit weird why they would list that, but it notes that it's 16 gigabits per second, or gigabytes per second. So that kind of lines up with the latest GDDR6 memory. And they're saying that it's going to be out in 2020, quarter 4. So end of the year for the 3080 Ti. Given the time differences between the two of when they release, this looks to match up pretty well with what's happened in the past. With the 10 series, they would release the 1070 and the 1080 first, and then they would release the Titan 3 months later, and then after that 3 months again they released the 1080 Ti. With that said, the 20 series, they released the 1070, the the 2070, the 2080, and the 2080 Ti all at the same time at the one show. Okay, so let's talk more about the 3080. And the 3080 has 4,608 cores, GPU cores, 144 ray tracing cores, 576 tensor cores, and 2,000 for the boost clock. And the RTX 3070 will be further cut down, so 3,584 cores. Ray tracing cores is about 112, tensor cores 448, and the boost clock is 1900. So it's clocked a little less than the 3080. And both of these cards will be coming out at the same time. The 3060 is cut down again from the 3070. It has 2,560 GPU cores. The ray tracing cores is 80 cores, tensor cores is 320, and the boost clock is 2000. So most of these 30 series cards boosts around about the same level, except for the 3080 Ti 1750. That may have to do with the fact that it's a much bigger chip, more cores, so the clock is slightly lower. But you may be able to boost it further yourself through overclocking. But let's take a look at the differences between the cards. So you'll see that the GPU cores, it has 8,192 for the 3080 Ti, and the GeForce 3080 has 4,608. So right off the top of the bat, without even looking at the clock, which will affect it, affect the performance, but even just looking at the GPU cores, we're looking at, let's see, got our calculator out here. So the 3080 Ti has about 45% improvement on the 3080, and then if you take in the difference between the boost clock here of about 12%, so you're looking at about 35% difference between the 3080 and the 3080 Ti, and that's really huge. There's a big gap in between the 3080 and the 3080 Ti. No doubt, because here they've gone for the full chip, the GA100, and we don't know if we're getting the full chip. If you look further down, they suggested in another article, Tweaktown did, that it may be the 3080 Ti may be a GA102 chip, which would only give you 5,376 cores. And here the GA103, they've said it has 3,840 cores, but here we've got 4,608 cores for the GA103. So all of these rumors, we don't know 100%. Who knows, like whether this is correct, whether the old information was correct, or whether the new information is correct. That said, if it was this, then it's very, very exciting that the 3080 Ti could be 35% faster than the 3080. And if you look and see at the 3070 and the 3080 difference, so we're looking at 77. So I would expect there's probably about a 25% difference, given the boost clock is about 5% slower here. There's a 25% difference between the 3070 and the 3080. And again, if you look at the difference between the 3060 and the 3070, you are looking again at about 25% difference between the 3060 and the 3070. So there's about 25% difference here, about 25% difference here, and 35% for the top end card. Now obviously that's all a little bit confusing, so I've gone ahead and actually calculated what the possible flops, teraflops, because everybody seems under teraflops compared with the old cards. So the older cards, the 2060 when it came out has 6.5 teraflops, and the 2070 had 7.5 teraflops, the 2080 had 10 teraflops, and the 2080 had 13.4 teraflops. And we've seen that Microsoft and Sony, they've kind of aimed in this ballpark between 8 to 12 teraflops, around a 2070 all the way up to maybe a 2080 and a little bit more than a 2080, maybe a 2080 Super type of performance, which will then go on to tell you that the Xbox Series X is not going to be very cheap, because this is serious stuff. So RTX 2080 was still selling, or Super rather, was selling at $699. So that's just for the chip or the GPU graphics card. Then you have to factor in everything else, like the CPU, the motherboard, the hard drive or the SSD, the casing, the controllers, the power supply, the Blu-ray drive, all of that, that's going to add up to the console cost. So to even be speculating that the Xbox Series X might be around $499, $599, in terms of hardware at least, is a seriously good deal on hardware alone. If you just wanted to play a few games with max settings, or as strong as you could get at the cheapest price that you can get it, then an Xbox Series X makes sense. If you needed more productivity, if you want to use your computer for other means as well as play games, then it might be a better option to go with a PC where you can do all of that. Now, going back to the teraflops, so if you calculate based on these numbers here, these on the latest rumors, given the GPU cores increase over the previous gen's cores, and the boost clock, you end up getting the following teraflop numbers, and this is the improvement that we may see if these rumors are true. So these rumors are saying that the RTX 3060 will be 10 teraflops, so up from 6.5 teraflops from the 2060. The RTX 3070 will be 13 teraflops, up from 7.5 teraflops in 2070. That's almost double, almost 70% more performance for the same level card. The RTX 3080 will be 17 teraflops, up from 10 teraflops on the 2080. And the RTX 3080 Ti, if they give you that full GA100 chip with 8,000 CUDA cores, that's going to be 26 teraflops, which is almost double of the RTX 2080 Ti 13.4. Now, this is really interesting because if you look at the 10 series, the one that the card that I have a GTX 1070 that gave me 6.5 teraflops. So there was really only a 1 teraflop performance difference, about 15 to 20% difference, going from the 1070 to the 2070, and now they're giving you 70% more performance. When they came out with the 20 series, I thought there must be something going on in Nvidia. They were looking to decrease the amount of graphics performance that they were going to give you, and maybe hold off on that graphics performance and sell it to you later on, maybe as a super card or in the next generation. So these rumors seem as though that's no longer the case anymore. We will have to see. I still kind of think, a part of me still thinks that they're just going to hold off on some of this performance, because Moore's law states that as you get smaller, it's going to cost more, and development times will be much longer to make things that are ever increasingly smaller. So right now, with the RTX 30 series, they're looking at a 7 nanometer process for their chips, and to get to say a 5 nanometer or a 4 or a 3, that's going to take even more work, and it's going to be even more. It's going to be even harder to actually get to that point. So everything's going to cost more. So the way they pay for all of that is to give it to you in smaller doses. So we've seen Nvidia give you the 20 series card and give you a mid-generation 20 super card for all of the people that didn't think the performance was enough, when they probably could have given that anyway to begin with. But the way that they want to sell these cards is that they want to come out with 5 or 6 cards, leave some gaps in the middle, and then target more cards in those gaps and sell you those cards. So then they have prices, they cover every price point essentially, even though it's all basically the same product. But you know, these rumors are incredibly interesting. The teraflop increases are so high for Nvidia, I almost feel like it's just not going to be believable. If they actually do give you RTX 3080 17 teraflops, that's going to sell a ton of cards. And if you're not going to buy the card, then you should probably buy the stock, Nvidia stock anyway. And 26 teraflops, I can't even imagine like what you would do with that at 4K, because you can probably get 4K 60 frames per second gaming right now with a 2080 Ti card, which is 13.4 teraflops, and you could probably play everything that was out right now. You probably wouldn't be able to play everything coming out in the next 5 years, but you would be able to play a lot in 4K right now. And so when I look and see RTX 3080 Ti, this seems like a product that is going to last you for most of next gen, especially if the next gen consoles are going to be stuck at 12 teraflops and 10 teraflops for, I guess, the next few years, maybe like 2 or 3 years. Maybe they'll come out with a mid-gen console, like we saw with the PS4 Pro and the Xbox One X. So this 3080 Ti will probably last you the entire gen. I don't think they will come out with a mid-gen console that's going to be 26 flops. That will just be another generation. So yeah, if they come out with this, I think this will last most of next gen. And even if you were on a 20 series card and you weren't thinking of upgrading another couple of generations, this kind of these specs kind of show the performance gains will probably be pretty big for this generation of cards. So there is still, like I said here, even if you had a 20 series card, there's a good reason to upgrade, which was not the case going from the 10 series to 20 series cards. So 10 series to 20 series, they gave most people about 15 to 20% performance, but in 30 series, they're looking at like 50% to 70% performance gains here, if these rumors are correct, which is pretty incredible. And we're going to be following this a lot more closely. There's going to be an Ampere presentation coming up in about a week. Nvidia's got a presentation for May the 14th, I believe, and while I don't think they're going to show off the gaming cards, they will at least show off some of the technical aspects of the new Ampere process. And yeah, this will probably come, and it says here, 3080 and 3070, it looks like it's coming out Q3. Q3 is June, July, August. So we're looking at some more concrete information about these cards as we get into June and July. And our last story this week comes from video cards. Gigabyte Intel Z490 motherboards will support 11th gen Rocket Lake S. Last episode, we were talking about the 10th core Comet Lake S, and I noted with Comet Lake S, generally speaking, of course, that Intel CPUs, normally you've had to change your motherboard if you wanted to also change your CPU. So if you wanted to upgrade, then you'd also have to buy the motherboard at the same time, which was a bit of a nuisance because that meant you had to buy another like $100, $200 motherboard. Now, Gigabyte is telling us that Z490 also supports 11th gen core. So it's looking like Z490, if you bought a 10th gen CPU, you'll also be able to use it later on with the 11th gen. Now, this has happened in the past, and you would just get a BIOS update for the motherboard, but it didn't happen all the time because the CPUs had different processors, and it wouldn't be compatible with the previous one. But now it's looking like it's going to support the next CPU coming down the line. That being said, the article talks about Intel Rocket Lake S is expected to launch later this year. Now, this is pretty crazy. 10th gen just got announced last week, at least very recently, and now it's looking like Rocket Lake S is again coming out. Intel are going to be again coming out with another CPU generation at the end of the year, 6 months down the line. We know why they're doing this, because AMD are coming out with their Ryzen chips in August, September, somewhere around then. So to keep up to date and to be the latest CPUs, I guess they're coming out with another generation. And if they are using the same motherboard, you can speculate that it's probably going to be on the same nanometer process, which is the 14 nanometer process. I think they even say it somewhere down here. So far, there is no confirmation on the fabrication process, but rumors suggest that Rocket Lake S will still rely on the 14 nanometer node. Intel is still on the 14 nanometer. They've had troubles to get down to the 7 nanometer, which is why they've been held up for like the last 3 or 4 years. And it looks like they're still being held up, and they're still having problems with 7 nanometer. And in the meantime, AMD, and by the way, AMD just outsources this to, I believe, TSMC, and they go on to do the and they're on the 7 nanometer for their Ryzens, but Intel wants to do it themselves, and they're having problems with the 7 nanometer. It's looking like Rocket Lake S is probably going to be just a small update for your CPU. Basically, you might get a boost clock. If you were thinking about waiting for 11th gen, I would say it probably doesn't really matter unless you don't need a CPU right now. Well, need a PC right now, I should say. It's going to be such a minor upgrade that you can probably just overclock your 10th gen CPU, and you're probably going to get close to that performance in 11th gen, and it's not going to be too terribly different. This looks like it's going to be another product to put out there so that they can say it's been released in November of 2020, and AMD's CPUs were released in September of 2020. So it looks like they're the newest CPU. And yeah, so it looks like 11th gen will just be a smaller update. Now, I will leave all of the stories that I've talked about in the description below, so you can check all of the stories out. And if you have any more comments, or if you want to talk about some of the things that I've talked about today, please feel free to leave them in the comments below, and I'll get back to you. If you enjoyed the show, thanks so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe and like the video, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.